So here today I have an educational consultant, a true expert, and you guys keep asking me questions about college prep and college admission, and I really focus on tutoring specifically. And anytime I have a question that is regarding going into college, I usually refer to Beth Cashel. And today what I did is I combined a bunch of questions that came from all of you, and I'm just going to ask her and have her answer. So the first question is about superscoring, and I want to know when colleges superscore and which colleges superscore, and how can you find out whether the college you want to go to superscores or when it doesn't?
Hi everybody, thanks for having me, Katya. This is great. What a great idea. I am really pleased to be here, and anytime you have questions, send them off to Katya and she can refer them to me. But today about superscoring. First of all, superscoring. What is superscoring? So superscoring is when you take, in the SAT, when you take your reading and writing score on one sitting and you combine it with a math score from a second sitting, because they're higher scores, and you combine them to get a superscore. So what that means is you could take a test twice. And on your first sitting, your reading was a 650 and your math was a 700. On your second sitting, your reading was a 700 and your math was a 620. So you could combine that. Well, you would take the higher scores from each section and combine them into a super score. The ACT is the same thing. The ACT is, there's 4 sections. You would take the highest section from each sitting to combine them into what is called a super score.
And now, when you refer to them as SAT and ACT, usually I think most students say SAT and ACT.
That's right.
Clarify,
That's right.
just to clarify for them.
And the other thing I want to be clear about superscoring is not all schools superscore.
How do you find out? Yeah.
Right. So the way you find out is you need to look at the tests. Now, it changes constantly. And right now we're in COVID, so the testing environment is changing daily. But everything that I do when I work with my students, if you are applying to a school, there are 2 things you could find out. There's a few things in testing. Do they require testing? Mm-hmm. If they do they superscore?
How do you go to the website for that?
You have to go to the website, and where you go is to.
Can we go to a hypothetical website right now?
Pick a school.
You pick a school. I don't know.
Okay, so
I don't want to go to
we're in New York City, so let's go to Columbia.
Mm-hmm. Just Columbia University.
Columbia University. So this is how I walk my students through it. So to Columbia, then you're going to go to the main page. Then you're going to go to undergraduate if they have that choice.
First, I have to agree to some cookies. Sure. Then I go to admissions.
Go to admissions. And then sometimes there's a choice of undergraduate or graduate. And if there is,
visit, learn, apply.
So go to apply.
Mm-hmm.
No, every school is going to be to apply up on the right.
And then here they do the degree.
Right. So every school will be different with that regard. So then let's say we're applying to Columbia College, which is their arts and science school. So press Columbia College. And then you're going to see first year admissions. If you're a first year admissions person, press first year admissions. So it's a little bit of a puzzle, a roadmap. Then you're going to look at application requirements. So you go to application requirements and it will tell you, and see standardized test. Then you're going to go to standardized test. So press standardized tests.
And there's going to be more.
Yeah, and that's going to give you everything you want to know. So you see the first thing it says is standardized tests are required for admissions according to the guidelines below. Now you need to be careful because sometimes some schools will superscore an SAT and not an ACT or an ACT or SAT. Mm-hmm. So you have to be very, very clear. Not all schools are the same and everything is different. So here it very clearly says an ACT, the ACT or the SAT. Now also something else that comes in besides your superscoring will be self-report. Mm-hmm. What does that mean, right? Everyone always asks, what does that mean? So when you're writing your spreadsheet, so I make like a big spreadsheet for my students. And I put right in when they're making their list what the testing requirements are. And you do that pretty soon because you need to know that also for them, Katya. So you need to understand what's going on, what's not. So typically your counselor or the student should do this. What do I need to do? What are my tests and what are the rules? And there's a few of them. Self-report means you don't have to pay for the College Board or the ACT. You can just on your Common App or your Coalition, whatever application it is, you can put the score report. Mm-hmm. Now the next thing, and then they say whether it's superscored. And you see how they say If you take the exam more than once, you will be evaluated on the highest score you received in the individual sections. That's the definition of superscoring. Now, the other thing is there'll be score choice. Now, this school doesn't because you superscore, but some schools who do superscore will still want you to send all of this testing.
Which school would that be?
So it varies. I believe Yale was one of them, but right now I wouldn't. You just have to look because it changes all the time. So
So maybe I'll just search for it and then I'll find I'll find that school that does it.
It would say right where we were reading. It would tell you. It would be right there.
The wording would be, we need to see all of the tests.
Yes.
And how frequently does that happen?
It's infrequently. There is a handful of schools that do that. That's not. There's a select few of schools that do that. Now, coming into the future, you just have, and the reason why. So does that mean that you really can't superscore and that it doesn't make sense, right? To take the test? Because if they see me taking it all these times, what will it look like? This is how the admissions people report. They do want to make sure, they do want to decrease, they believe it decreases the frenzy of taking lots of tests, because if you are sending all your tests, you might be less likely to take 5 tests. And nobody should take 5 tests, right? I mean, you shouldn't be doing that anyhow, sitting 5 times. So I think they believe it just gives them a much more holistic approach, and it also reduces the frenzy of letting and sometimes students don't understand about, maybe super scoring. So maybe some schools think, well, we'll just help you, we'll super score. I will tell you, colleges always want to look for the best. So they're looking to get the highest score. It works to their advantage. One of the reasons schools super score is because they get a higher average test score, right? So their rankings in US News and World Report, they can report that their SAT and ACT is actually very high because they're looking at the super score. So it's to their advantage, just like it is to the student's advantage to super score.
So super score is frequent, but sending all of your test results is infrequent.
That's right. You really have to specifically look at each school's testing requirements because they are all very different. Some superscore ACT and some do not superscore ACT. So it changes, and it changes yearly. So what I have lists that give testing requirements on each schools. I get them at the beginning of a school year, an application year, and that from last year, which really is already outdated.
Yeah, got it.
But all you do is going to the required
standardized testing tab.
and every single college has that tab.